The first morning I woke up in my own house, I didn't set an alarm. That sounds small. It isn't. For 37 years, someone else's needs decided when I opened my eyes. My mother's migraines, my brother's schedule, the rotating chaos of a family that treated me like a piece of furniture, useful, movable, and easy to ignore until someone needed to sit down. I bought the cabin on a Thursday in late September. It was listed as a lakeside retreat in the real estate photos, which was a generous way of describing a two-bedroom cottage at the end of a gravel road with a dock that needed 2 boards replaced and a kitchen that smelled faintly of cedar and old coffee. I made an offer the same afternoon I toured it. My realtor said I should sleep on it. I told her I had been sleeping on things my entire life and I was done. The closing took 3 weeks. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I want to be clear about why. This wasn't secrecy for the sake of drama. I had simply learned, through 37 years of very thorough instruction, that anything I had was considered shared property by the people who raised me. My first car, my brother borrowed it for a weekend trip and returned it with a cracked bumper and no explanation. My savings account in my 20s, my mother asked to borrow from it 4 separate times and repaid exactly none of it. My apartment after college, my brother moved in for what he called 2 weeks and stayed for 14 months, during which time he never paid rent, ate through my groceries, and told my then boyfriend that I was kind of a pushover. Honestly, he wasn't wrong at the time. He was accurate in a way that took me years to stop being embarrassed about. I am not a pushover anymore. The cabin sat on the eastern shore of a small lake about 2 hours from the city where I grew up and where my family still lived. The property was managed by a small homeowners association, 9 cabins total around the lake, all privately owned, all with the same basic covenants about noise, guests, and dock usage. When I moved in, the association president came by with a welcome basket containing local honey, a hand-drawn map of the hiking trails, and a laminated card with the after-hours contact number. Her name was Margaret. She was in her late 60s, had owned her cabin for 22 years, and had the calm, unflappable energy of a woman who had seen every kind of neighbor dispute and survived all of them. I liked her immediately. I spent the first month making the cabin mine. I replaced the dock boards. I painted the bedroom the deep blue-green color I had wanted on every wall I'd ever lived inside and never been able to choose because I was always sharing the space with someone who had a different opinion. I hung my grandmother's quilt above the fireplace. I bought a reading chair so comfortable that I sometimes fell asleep in it at 9 in the evening and didn't apologize to anyone about it. I told my best friend, who lives in Portland, about the cabin 2 weeks after closing. I told my therapist the same week. That was the full list of people who knew, until my mother mentioned it to my brother. I still don't know exactly how she found out. My best guess is that I mentioned the lake town by name in a text about a hiking trail, and my mother, who has always treated my phone notifications as communal reading material when we're in the same room, connected the pieces. She denies this. It doesn't matter. What matters is that on a Wednesday evening in early November, my brother called me. I saw his name on my screen and I felt that specific tension that lives between my shoulder blades whenever my family contacts me, the one that showed up so reliably over the years that my therapist and I gave it a name. I answered anyway, because I was still in the early stages of believing that things could be different. "Mom says you bought a place on Lake Carver," he said. No greeting, no how are you, just the flat declaration of someone who had already decided what the conversation was about. "I did," I said. "How come you didn't say anything?" "I wanted it to be mine first," I said. That was the honest answer. There was a short pause. I recognized that pause. It was the sound of my brother recalibrating, moving from the conversation he expected to have toward the one that would get him what he wanted. "That's actually perfect timing," he said. "Me and some guys from work have been trying to plan something before the end of the year. A long weekend. 5, maybe 6 people. We figured a lake house would be ideal." I said, "I hear you. The answer is no." Another pause. Longer this time. "It's just a weekend." "I know. The answer is still no." His voice shifted into the register I had heard my entire life, the one that implied I was being unreasonable, difficult, ungrateful for something I couldn't quite name. He said the place was just sitting there. He said I wasn't using it every weekend. He said it would be good for me to share more, that I had always been too closed off. He said our mother was worried about me isolating. I said, "I've heard all of this. The answer is no. This is my home and I'm not making it available." He said, "Okay, fine," in the tone that means nothing about it was fine. I hung up and sat with my tea and watched the lake through the window, and I did not feel guilty. That was new. That feeling of not feeling guilty, I had been practicing it in therapy for 2 years, and this was the first time it arrived naturally, without effort, like it actually belonged to me. 2 weeks later, I got a text from my brother on a Sunday morning. Heading up today. Should be there around 2. There are 8 of us. Don't stress about food. We'll handle it. I read it twice. 8 people. No question, no request. A statement of arrival like I had already agreed to something I had never agreed to. I called him immediately. He didn't answer. I called twice more. Nothing. I texted, "Do not come." I said no. This is not happening. No response. I sat with the phone in my hand for about 30 seconds. Then I did what I had already thought through. Because I had genuinely known that a single phone call refusal was not going to be the end of it. I had known this the way you know things about people after 37 years of watching how they move through the world. I called Margaret. She answered on the second ring. I explained the situation clearly and without drama. My brother was driving 2 hours to show up uninvited with 7 other people at my property, despite being told explicitly that this was not permitted. I asked her what the association's guest policy was and whether she could help me enforce it. She said, "Give me 20 minutes. She called back in 15. She told me that under the association's covenants, any non-owner guests staying overnight had to be registered in advance with written consent from the property owner on file. She told me that the association had an arrangement with a property management company that handled after-hours situations, including unauthorized access. She gave me the name of the contact there. She also told me that the access road to the lake was technically private, association-maintained property, and that vehicles could be turned away at the gate if the property owner had not authorized their entry. I did not know about the gate. I had driven through it every time I visited and never thought about it as anything other than a decorative wooden crossbar. It turned out the crossbar locked. Margaret said she would make sure it was locked. I thanked her, and then I called the property management contact, a man named Dale who spoke in short, direct sentences and seemed thoroughly unsurprised by the situation. I gave him my brother's name, told him the approximate arrival time, and confirmed that I was formally withholding consent for any entry or overnight stay. He said he would have someone at the gate. Then I made a cup of coffee and I waited. At 2:17 the afternoon, my brother called me from the gate. I answered, "There's a guy here saying we can't come in," he said. He sounded genuinely bewildered, which told me everything about how seriously he had taken my refusal. "That's correct," I said. "What do you mean, that's correct? We drove 2 hours." "I know. I told you not to come. I told you twice by phone and once by text. You're being completely insane right now. We're family." That word, family. I had watched it function as a master key my entire life inserted into any locked door, expected to open everything. I had spent years feeling the weight of it, the obligation embedded in it, the way it could make no feel like a character flaw. I said, "Being family doesn't give you access to my home without my permission." I said, "No. The gate is locked. I'm asking you to turn around. So that's it? You're just going to leave us standing here? You chose to drive here after I told you not to. That was your decision. The consequences of it belong to you." He put one of his friends on the phone. I didn't recognize the voice. Some guy who introduced himself as if that would change anything, who said they had been looking forward to this and that surely we could work something out. I said there was nothing to work out. I said the access road was private property and continued presence after being denied entry could constitute trespassing. I said this calmly because I had looked it up. There was some muffled conversation on his end. Then my brother came back on. "You're going to regret this," he said. "I don't think so," I said. He hung up. I watched through my window as the afternoon light moved across the water. The dock creaked once in the wind. A heron landed on the far shore and stood there in that perfect, unmoving way herons have, like they are in no hurry about anything. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The following Friday, I received a certified letter at my city apartment. It was from an attorney I had never heard of, representing my brother in what was described as a property access dispute. The letter claimed that my brother had a documented history of using the cabin property and had made financial contributions toward its upkeep, giving him a reasonable claim to continued access under principles of implied license. It used a lot of language that was designed to sound authoritative. The core claim was that I could not simply deny him access to a property he had helped establish. My brother had never set foot in the cabin. I had owned it for less than 8 weeks. I read the letter 3 times. The first time, I felt the shoulder blade tension return. The second time, I noticed that several of the claims in the letter were not just exaggerated, but specifically, verifiably false claims about financial contributions that had never happened, about access arrangements that had never been discussed. The third time, I recognized what this was. It was a pressure document, designed to make me doubt myself, to make the cost of holding my ground feel high enough that backing down seemed easier. I had seen this pattern before, not with attorneys, but with my family's emotional tactics, the escalation, the formal language, the implicit threat. I called my own attorney on Monday morning. She listened to the full situation, read the letter I had forwarded, and said three things. First, the claims in the letter had no legal merit. An implied license claim requires actual documented use and contribution, neither of which my brother had. Second, the fact that the letter contained demonstrably false statements about financial contributions was worth noting, because making material misrepresentations in a legal demand letter has its own set of consequences. Third, I should send a formal response denying all claims and explicitly revoking any implied permission, real or alleged, for my brother or any associate of his to access the property. She drafted the response the same week. It was 4 paragraphs. It was very clear. What I did not expect was what my attorney found when she ran a routine title search as part of documenting the property's clean ownership history. There was a lien on the cabin. It had been filed 11 days after I closed, almost exactly when my brother would have learned about the property from my mother. It was filed under my brother's name, claiming an unpaid debt of $14,000 that he alleged I owed him from a personal loan made several years prior. There was no such loan. There had never been any loan. My brother had given me money exactly once in my adult life, $300 for my car repair in 2019, which I paid back within 2 months, which I had a Venmo record of. My attorney said, "This is a fraudulent lien." I said, "I know." She said, "Do you want to just get it removed, or do you want to pursue this?" I thought about 37 years. I thought about the cracked bumper and the 14 months of unpaid rent and the 4 loans my mother never repaid and the reading chair in the cabin that I had picked out alone and the morning I woke up without an alarm for the first time. I said, "I want to pursue this." Filing a fraudulent lien against real property is, in most states, a serious matter. It is not a civil nuisance. It falls under statutes that treat the deliberate encumbrance of someone else's property with a false claim as a form of fraud. My attorney filed to have the lien removed and simultaneously filed a complaint with the county recorder's office documenting the fraudulent filing. She also sent a formal letter to my brother's attorney, noting that we were aware of the lien, that we had documentation disproving the alleged debt, and that we intended to pursue all available remedies. My brother's attorney withdrew from the representation within 10 days. The lien was removed 3 weeks after that, with a formal finding by the county that it had been improperly filed. The county also referred the matter for further review. I was told the process could take several months. I was told to keep my documentation organized. I kept it very organized. My mother called me during all of this. She called multiple times. The calls followed a predictable arc: first concern, then defensiveness on my brother's behalf, then the suggestion that I was being vindictive, then the argument that family should handle things privately rather than involving lawyers and courts. She used the word family as a key again, inserting it into every lock she could find. I said the same thing each time, in different words. He filed a fraudulent document against my property. That is not a family disagreement. That is a legal matter, and it is being handled legally. The last time she called, she said, "I just don't understand why you need to make everything so difficult." I said, "I bought a house." I said no to unauthorized visitors. I defended my property against a false legal claim. I have not made anything difficult. I have simply stopped making things easy. She didn't have an answer for that. I drove up to the cabin on the first Saturday of December. The temperature had dropped and there was a thin rime of ice along the edges of the dock, and the lake had gone from its summer blue to a flat, silver gray that I found unexpectedly beautiful. I brought groceries for 3 days and no particular agenda. Margaret came by the second morning with coffee and the local paper and sat with me on the porch for an hour. She told me about the history of the Lake Association, the neighbors she had watched come and go, the disputes she had mediated, the families who had held the same cabins for 3 generations. She talked about the value of knowing that your space was genuinely yours, that the boundaries around it meant something and would be respected. I told her a little about what had happened. Not everything, but enough. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then she said, "People who have never had to fight for a quiet place don't understand what it costs to protect one." I looked at the lake. The heron was back on the far shore, or maybe a different heron, I couldn't tell. Still unmoving, still entirely unbothered by everything happening around it. "I understand now," I said. The legal process moved slowly. the way legal processes do. My attorney kept me updated in brief, factual emails that I read carefully and then set aside. I did not spend my weekends at the cabin thinking about my brother or my mother or the certified letter or the fraudulent lien. I spent them reading in the blue-green bedroom and replacing the weather stripping on the front door and learning how to use the kayak I had bought secondhand from a neighbor 2 cabins over. The county's review concluded in late winter. My brother was found to have filed a document containing materially false statements with the intent to cloud the title of real property. The matter was referred to the district attorney's office. I was notified by letter. My attorney called to tell me before the letter arrived. She said, "I want to be clear about what this means. It doesn't mean a guaranteed outcome. The DA's office will make their own determination." I said, "I understand." She said, "But the documentation is very strong." I said, "I know. I kept everything." My brother hired a new attorney. He called me once after that, in early spring, from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I didn't recognize it. He said he wanted to talk things through, that things had gotten out of hand, that he was willing to put all of it behind us if I was. I said, "There is nothing to put behind us from my side. I don't have unresolved feelings about this. I have documentation." He said, "You're really going to let it go this far over a lake house?" I said, "You filed a fraudulent lien against my property. It went as far as you took it." He said, "I thought you'd back down." I appreciated the honesty of that, actually. It was the most accurate thing he had said in the entire situation. He had made a calculation based on 37 years of watching me back down, and this time the calculation was wrong. I said, "I know you did. That's why you did it." I didn't wait for him to answer. I ended the call and put the phone face down on the dock and watched a pair of ducks navigate the wind on the far end of the lake. It was a Thursday afternoon in April. I had taken a personal day from work specifically to come up and do nothing in particular, which was something I was getting much better at. The dock boards were solid under my feet. I had replaced them myself in October, following a YouTube tutorial and using wood that I had selected at the lumber yard and paid for with my own money. I thought about that sometimes, the small, specific materiality of ownership, the weight of the boards, the smell of the new wood sealing in the sun, the fact that this dock, this water, this particular angle of afternoon light belonged to me in the practical and documented and legally defended sense of the word. My brother's case was still pending when the lilacs came in along the eastern path. I was told it would likely be pending for a while longer. I was told to be patient. I was patient. I was patient in the way I had learned to be. Not the passive, waiting kind that had characterized most of my life. The kind where you wait for other people to decide things, where you absorb and hope the pressure eventually lifts. This was a different kind. Purposeful. Informed. I knew what I had filed, what I had documented, what my rights were, and where they stood. My therapist, when I told her the full sequence of events, said something I have thought about since. She said that the story I used to tell about myself was that I was someone things happened to, and the story I was now writing, one decision at a time, was different. I said, "It doesn't feel like a story. It just feels like choices." She said that was exactly the point. The morning I finished fixing the weather stripping on the back door, I made coffee and took it to the dock and sat with my feet hanging over the edge, not quite touching the water. The lake was very still. The sky was pale and wide, and nothing about it was asking anything of me. I did not have my phone. I had left it inside on purpose. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the coffee to go cool, long enough for the light to shift, long enough for that particular silence to settle in that only arrives when you are genuinely alone in a space that is genuinely yours. It felt like the first morning all over again. The no-alarm morning. The morning I had been building toward for 37 years without knowing that was what I was doing. I have told almost no one about the cabin. I still keep the circle small. My best friend in Portland knows. My therapist, Margaret, who walks by sometimes on her evening circuit of the lake and waves from the shore without stopping unless I wave her in, which I do about half the time, because I am learning the difference between solitude and isolation, learning it slowly, getting it more right each season. The people who need to know about the property do know. The county recorder knows. My attorney knows. The association knows. The documentation is organized and current, and filed in a place I can find it. My brother knows that I am not someone things happen to anymore. That, in the end, was the point. Not the cabin. Exactly though, the cabin is mine, and I love it, and the lilacs along the east path are extraordinary in May, and the ice at the dock edges in winter is genuinely beautiful. Not the legal victory, Exactly, though, I will not pretend the outcome of the county review was something I was indifferent to. The point was the decision I made in the moment I got that text on a Sunday morning, telling me 8 people were on their way, that I should not stress about food, that my life and my space and my hard-won peace were once again being arranged around someone else's convenience. The decision was, not this time. Not this house. Not this door. Not this dock. Not this lake. Not this silence. I drove 2 hours and paid for and earned in every sense of the word. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue at the gate. I did not write a long emotional message that my brother could ignore or screenshot or use against me. I called the right people. I presented the right documentation. I said no with the calm, specific authority of someone who has finally understood that no does not require justification, does not require apology, and does not become negotiable because someone is willing to drive a long distance to challenge it. I said no. I enforced it. I defended it. And then I went and sat on my dock and watched the heron stand motionless on the far shore, and the water move the way water does, and none of it asked anything of me at all.